Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, April 25th, and this is the Round 1 Draft Review Show. Last night, we got through the first 32 picks of the NFL Draft after speculating for 3 weeks. In this episode, we'll talk about who won, who lost, some initial rookie odds, and my takes on each and every pick. I'm going to see if I can get through it without sneezing, without coughing. The throat has kind of checked out of business over the last 24 hours, so feeling a little bit under it, but we're going to grind it out, and hopefully the voice holds through and holds steady. John Coleman in bright and early, happy on the Loveland underpick. My Colts source I mentioned yesterday said they were pissed the Bears took him. They thought Membu might slide to 14 if the Jets took Warren and would have taken him. That was a good call by you, John, about Colts and tight end. Certainly was something that was out there a lot. I have to think they're still somewhat happy that they got Warren, just fitting in that scheme a little bit more. Was bottom of the league last year for receptions from tight ends. So they get Warren, a little bit more of like a George Kittle type or a Gronkowski type in some of the scouting reports. And so with that physical style that they have on offense, maybe it's not as bad as a fit as might being let out to be, but I certainly, you put Loveland in there as the bigger target for Richardson downfield and his route running. That would have been a great fit too. But Colts tight end, Loveland under, good call on your part. Brandon says, great intel leading into the draft. The accounts are flush this morning. Was really strong with positional totals. The mock draft got the first 7 correct, 11 total player team matches. So that was an overperform as well. A couple positional ones, like team to draft specific position, ended up getting muddy later in the first round. And that was the only real negative that I had from a betting or analysis perspective. And I think next year, outside of maybe the top 5 or 6, I might kind of stray away from those. I've tended the last 2 years to go a little bit later down the board with some of those. It just didn't quite fall the way in the middle of the draft I was thinking it might, with some of those shots being taken at the end of the first round. But it was still, as you mentioned, I think pretty solid overall for anybody listening to the show. I think you ended up in a very good spot, especially with those positional over-unders. Preston V20 says, good morning, go Hawks. Pumped for it. Got a new great interior offensive lineman to help things out, so that's a big boost to Seattle. Let's start off with some of the winners. I sent out an email yesterday on footballbetters.com right as the draft ended. Had a couple of them that stood out to me. The first, I think the Jags trading up to get Travis Hunter was a win for Jacksonville. I think it's a win for both sides in the trade, to make it clear. I've seen a lot of takes on both sides. I feel like anytime that there's a trade, it's always going to be viewed as an overpay. That's like the default response. But I think both sides win in this, and I think it's great for Jacksonville. What I liked was that they have this young GM that comes in and makes a decisive move in his first opportunity to do so, attack the O-line in free agency, probably will end up attacking the D-line in day 2 and 3 and beyond. But to go up and get a guy like Hunter, who he clearly wanted, fits a need that the Jacksonville Jaguars need, and just gives a boost to the team coming off of a season where Trevor Lawrence missed 8 games. It's a new regime. It's a new refresh. I like the move for them to go out and do that and show some direction. I think it was probably pretty easy for him to sit and be passive, and this took a lot to make that stance early. And so for a Jags team that desperately needs a refresh and desperately needs a bit of a change in direction and just something of a spark to get this team going again, I think that was a great move by them. I thought the Giants doing the common sense thing with Abdul Carter was a win, certainly when you think about this defense and how stacked it is up front. Where are you putting this Giants defensive line now? Is it top 3? Is it top 2? I think it's in the discussion for it. And for a team that struggled on offense to score and to put up points, to have a unit like this up front on the other side of the football is going to allow them to be more competitive in games. And so this pick was viewed as going a couple different directions. I'm glad they stuck with the common sense approach and went with Abdul Carter. Now, the flip side of this is trading up to 25 for Jackson Dart. I'm a bit torn on the Dart move up. It was mocked by Dane Brugler. It was mocked by Daniel Jeremiah. It did end up a little bit later than perhaps expected. But with Winston added last month, with Wilson added last month, I get the path where Dart is there to learn and be behind them and develop. But if this is a season that doesn't come through for the Giants in a very difficult division with a very difficult schedule, is Brian Daboll going to still be there next year and beyond? Is this going to be a shift next year if it's another 4 or 5 win season for the Giants? And what does that development end up looking like for Dart? And does it prove to be perhaps more of a conflict this year that is now introduced into that locker room, where if Wilson or Winston are underperforming, there's calls for the rookie to start? I don't know how they handle this. And I don't know if they needed to introduce that into things in a year that is so critical to holding on to the job and at least extending it for Daboll. I don't know what to think of it necessarily. And maybe you have thoughts in the comments that you're going to leave on Jackson Dart and the fit with the New York Giants. But this, to me, I feel a lot better about Carter at 3 than I do Dart at 25 with the trade up. Another one that I love, you guys know exactly where I'm going with this. Las Vegas Raiders, Ashton Jeanty. They had to do it. It was the move I think Carroll wanted all along. I think it was the move that Spytek wanted all along. They are in a division from hell. And we'll talk about the Broncos in a second, who got a little bit better. They need a weapon. They needed something. You sign Geno. You sign Max Crosby. You get Pete Carroll at 75. You have to have something to just give you that chance of the big playability, to give you that chance of just competing with these other 3 teams in the division. And I think getting Ashton Jeanty absolutely provides that. I'm glad that he ended up going 6 to the Raiders. I think a lot of people who have followed the show who had bets on that are probably pretty happy, depending what price you got. I think it was the right move. If they would have went O-line, man, I think it would have ended up just being disappointing for where this team is. And to me, everything that they've done so far says they want to compete right now, and they think that they can be competitive in the division. Adding Jeanty, I think, is another signal that you know exactly what you're getting out of the Raiders this year every single week. I think it's a great move for them to get Jeanty, and they had to be thrilled with how things went between the 2nd and 5th spot ahead of them to perhaps allow Jeanty to slide down to number 6. So I think that was great. Another big win, San Francisco 49ers with Michael Williams. This is Robert Saleh now rebuilding that defense. It is going to give them a return to the identity that they had a couple of years ago, the way that they can move around Williams opposite of Bosa. I think that is an awesome fit for San Francisco. I think it's an awesome fit for Saleh. There's a huge ceiling in a lot of scouting reports and commentary with Williams and what he can be if he can get healthy. He's just tailor-made to be in that 4-3 defensive end spot. I think even you can kick him inside to DT at times based on some of the reports I read. I think it's a great fit for what they want to do. Another one that I really liked, Arizona getting Walter Nolan, defensive tackle. A couple of weeks now, I've been saying like the Arizona Cardinals could be sneaky and a little bit underrated going into the season. I felt that they were a defensive lineman away. They did a good job adding in the free agency window. But a guy like Walter Nolan, I think, is a really good fit for Jonathan Gannon. I think he elevates this defense and the potential that they have a little bit further. I like everything about the Cardinals going into this season. I like the defense. They're just really trying to beef up for what Gannon wants. Every single week, this team just plays incredibly hard and incredibly physical. And you're really starting to see the talent increase a lot too. And so they finished last year like 16th, 17th in market ratings based on point spreads and how things were closing. So there's a high ceiling for the Cardinals this year. And I love that they went defensive line getting Walter Nolan. Now, Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 19. I've seen both sides of this morning. Emeka Egbuka was a bit of a surprise to go 19 as early as he did. But I think perhaps the bigger surprise was that he went to Tampa Bay. Everywhere that I was really looking at had Tampa Bay going defense. Like, I never really saw the case made by anyone for the Buccaneers to go offense. It happened at 19, and I'm sitting there. It's hard to argue with what this offense is going to have for weapons going into this season. Evans, Godwin, McMillan, Egbuka. Those 4 weapons with Baker Mayfield, with Bucky Irving. I mean, what a luxury for the new offensive coordinator, Josh Glizzard. I mean, you can't ask for a whole lot more. This was a team that had a very explosive offense a year ago and really started to improve as the season went on. There might be a little bit of speculation about whether or not losing Liam Cohen is going to impact this, but my goodness, for weapons, this is fantastic. There's also an element of perhaps future-proofing a little bit. Evans getting up there in age, Godwin getting into his 30s, coming off of an injury. And so you might be running out of years with those guys, but you add him in next to McMillan with those two up front. My goodness, what a list of receivers. This is going to be pretty fantastic offense for the Buccaneers in 2025. Ravens getting Malachi Starks, another pick I liked. We talked about this the last couple of days. He's just perfect for the Ravens. And the fact that he can play both safety positions and the amount of times that they move around Hamilton, I think is just a perfect fit for this defense and what they want to do. He can cover at both spots. They can get creative with Hamilton. This is now, I think, a top 5 safety duo in the league. I think the ceiling is even higher than that. And so this is going to be very difficult for other teams to manage. And the creativity that the Ravens can introduce is pretty spectacular. Last one of the draft that stood out that I would put in the winners or things that I loved. I don't know how the Eagles get away with it almost every single year. For them to get Jahad Campbell at 31 is pretty incredible. And it required the Buccaneers passing on him, a couple others team passing on them. They do this seemingly every single draft where they have these guys that they're able to evaluate and see through injury concerns like Campbell has, or see through character concerns like past guys have in the draft that had went on the defensive lineman. And now you add Campbell into the kind of Zach Bond role at an elevated level, perhaps, and how he can be moved around and how you can see him utilized with what Vic Fangio can deploy him as. That's a scary thought for a defense that's already fantastic. Now, he was labeled as a PUP candidate to start the season. There was a video of him running on a treadmill. Torn labrum versus running on a treadmill, hard to say. So the Eagles obviously have a knack for seeing through a lot of these things, and perhaps that's what they got here. But this is just such an Eagles pick. And if they're right with the evaluation and the injury stuff, and they get him week 1, I mean, my goodness, all of a sudden they go from a team that you might be questioning some of the guys that they lost and some of the changes, and now you're looking at him added in there and perhaps more to come as just building up that strength even further. So I really like that Campbell fit for the Eagles at 31. Some great comments coming in. Keep them coming in, guys. If you're watching, drop the comments on the right side. Would love to see questions, love to see thoughts. Who were you guys surprised about? Who did you guys like? Who did you guys dislike? Were there any bigger bets at longer odds that you guys were able to hit? Let me know in the chat and drop the comment. Justin Paul says, great content as always. Appreciate you coming back for another show. Ryan Roberts, how do the Eagles consistently do this crap in the draft? Pains me so much. I'm with you. It's incredible how, I mean, there were multiple teams ahead of them that could have been a fit for what you were getting from Campbell. And it just, every year it seems to slide to them further down the draft. David Fink back for a live show. First time in a while. Need my second coffee already after an early start for me. Appreciate the insight. Glad to have you back for another live stream, David. James Ferguson, Banks at 6. Crazy smoke screen. Took a cash out profit. Also, Williams top 10. Took profit cash out. Well done making both of those decisions. You know, I don't think any of the draft week hype and switches came through. Jackson Dart being a trade up for the Giants late first round did, but it certainly came later. But I think about, again, you guys that have been listening to the show, you've heard it where there was this consensus that made a lot of sense in the top 7 or 8 for like 3 weeks prior to this. And it was all rooted in really concrete info and commentary and quotes from coaches and GMs matched with team needs. Like, it was really solid. And then in the last 4 days, Monday to Thursday this week, we heard Genty 5 to the Jaguars. We heard Banks 6 to the Raiders. We heard Membu was moving up. There was this shift with both tight ends. there was so much that came out of kind of nowhere. There was Barron going 7 to the Jets. There was Ted McMillan going 5 to the Jaguars. Like all of these things that popped up this week, whether it was from Schefter, whether it was from other channels on the NFL Network, whether it was from Schrager, like I feel like all of them missed, or 95% of them ended up missing. And the consensus that was established prior came through in the top 7. And that was what led to creating the mock draft, which was the strategy that I took. But that's what led to having 11 of the 32 be team player slot matches. I could just all of the earlier stuff this year won through. I know that's traditionally the case, but this year it seemed like all of this stuff that came late was kind of a miss by everybody. James Runyon says Ted McMillan top 10 plus money was good. There was some late, like between like 2 and 4 p.m. Pacific, some really late steam and some commentary and some text messages that were fired up about him going to the Panthers. His price at 8 really crashed in. That was kind of like the last big move, but it was never really public. So good for you to get top 10 at plus money. That's a nice win. James Ferguson was pumped. We nailed Barron, got 1.76. That's awesome. That was a little bit of a nervous last day. Again, with all the news about him going top 10, and that just wasn't the case with him going 20. So all of those hit. Other positional ones that we had here, Loveland under was good. The Membu over was good. The Barron over was good. The Warren over was good. I'm trying to think. There were a few others that stood out, but those were all great for anybody who was able to get it. So that was good. Ryan Roberts with under 2.5 quarterbacks plus money was a nice hit for me. That's awesome to hear. It was a good bet as well. Let's get to some of the picks I did not like. I don't want to necessarily call them losers. I know we do winners, losers. It fits in with the media, but just ones that I didn't love or I thought were a bit overreaching. The first is the Atlanta Falcons. I didn't dislike Mykel Williams going 15. I think that's a good fit for them. I don't know what they saw in James Pierce to move up to 26. I thought that was the part that was a reach and an overpay in the trade and what they gave up. Again, it's always easy to say this is an overpay. This was too much. And I'm doing that here with the Falcons. The trade up for Pierce, I don't know what they're seeing in that. And I don't know that they desperately need pass rush help. I get it. And they were tied to Pierce a lot. There was the character concern stuff that caused some teams to perhaps look the other way. But moving up as high upside of a pass rusher that Pierce might have, as fast as he is, as much connections as there were, I don't know. I felt like it was a little bit too much. I get that Pierce fits the space and how Morris runs his defense, but it felt like a lot for the Falcons here at 26. Some other ones that I did not like. Pittsburgh going with Derek Harmon at DT. I would say it was more of an intriguing decision to me. You think about the defensive line and some of the issues they've had on the interior, aging guys, departures. I get it. It was a position of need. They had to address it. I'm just surprised that they didn't end up going the quarterback route, whether it's with Sanders, could have been Dart if they really wanted. They right now have Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson on the roster. Even a trade or anything, I felt like that was much more of a pressing need. And I'm just surprised to see that they justified Harmon at DT at 21 as more of a value play and a fit and the right decision rather than trying to add to the quarterback room and give themselves a chance to compete. I get that they've spent a lot of resources in the trenches for the past couple of years, but I don't love this one with Harmon going 21 to the Steelers. Another one I didn't love was Tyleik Williams going to the Lions at 28. First of all, I didn't see it anywhere. I don't know if anybody did for a first round for Tyleik Williams going anywhere in the first round. I don't even know what that would have paid. Like, he was nowhere on the radar. I was reading a Matt Miller article today. I think the highest anybody had him was like 48th or 50th. So this was the big surprise. But what I don't like about this is I don't quite understand where he's going to play. From everything that I understood about the Lions and the defense is that they were going to push to get an edge rusher opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. Well, getting a 330-pound defensive tackle when you already have McNeil and Reeder clogging up the middle, who are both fantastic at their position. I don't really know how the Lions are going to use Williams or what their plan with him is. And so to see them use this pick when they could have went with a guy like Campbell, perhaps, or a guy like Hairston who went after. I don't know what they're planning here with Williams. So I could be proven wrong. We'll see. But I don't know how he fits in with what the Lions currently have. So that's another one that stands out to me. The other one, as Ryan Roberts brings it up, I wrote that I was indifferent about the use of Booker. And it's clear that with Schottenheimer coming in, the Cowboys want to run the football. That's what he did in Seattle. That's what he wants to do in Dallas. They added running backs in the free agency window. That is what Jerry Jones has wanted to do forever. So you have this emphasis on the run game, and you have departures and retirement up front for the Cowboys. It was a need to fill. My question, I guess, becomes who are going to be the weapons that are going to be utilized on this team? Because outside of CeeDee Lamb, it's a little bit thin, to put it politely, for the Cowboys. And they had the option to go with either of those two wide receivers, which were drafted after, whether it was Egbuka, whether it was Golden. I thought with so many ties to Golden and the visits that was going to be the pick, and that was the direction that they were going to go. Clearly, they want to go more physical. They want to build up the O-line. They want to push the run game, and that's where I think they're going to go. My, I guess, higher level concern is that are they going to be able to run in this division? Perhaps Booker was a necessity to add in somebody to give them at least a chance to do so. But we just talked about the Giants' defensive line, which is probably going to be a top 3 unit in the NFL. You have the Eagles' defensive front, which is going to be up there as well. And the Commanders are doing their best to improve a little bit. They're going to be better than they were last year too. So you're facing, in 6 of your games this year, just brutal opponents up front, especially in 4 of the 6. And so you desperately needed some help on that O-line. I just wonder if the points are going to be there outside of CeeDee Lamb in this offense. Other comments that I would put as more just kind of interesting, or ones that stood out, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a win or a lose, but more so just telling us a little bit about what these teams want to do. I'll go to number 20 with the Denver Broncos, drafting Jahdae Barron. This is going to be, I think, potentially the best defense in the NFL prior to the draft last night. Now you add Barron in. I mean, the Broncos are all in on defense. And does it exceed the 2015 Broncos defense, which was historically great? I think it might have a chance to do so. I don't think that's a crazy comparison at all after adding Greenlaw and Hufanga and how great it was last year. Now, where does Barron fit with McMillan? I was reading some articles this morning that think that Barron is going to play opposite of Surtain, but Barron is kind of labeled as that nickel guy, and that's part of the reason he fell down and slid down the board. However, on the other hand, I go back to some of the early commentary from Daniel Jeremiah on the conference call that had Barron as a top 10 talent on his board, but he said he was going to slide. Part of the reason that we were betting the overs because of how much nickel he plays. So top 10 talent for Barron, but where does he fit in with this Broncos defense? Certainly not a problem for Denver to find a fit for him, but it's interesting to see the Broncos, who were mocked by so many, to go running back in this scenario and had the opportunity to go Hampton, who was the guy that everybody expected Peyton to pick. Instead of that, they elect to go and add on to their defense. I think that's pretty telling for what they want to be going into this season and how they see the best way to compete in that division from hell in the AFC West. Some other ones that stood out: Josh Simmons going 32 to the Kansas City Chiefs. They continue to try to fix their offensive tackle issues. This was a pretty popular choice, ended up falling to him. I've seen on one hand it was labeled as a dream scenario because Simmons was a guy, if you were listening to the broadcast that late, Nick Saban was talking about it, saying that if he would have elected to go into the draft next year, he would have been a top 5 pick. And there was speculation that he would have been this year if not for the torn patellar injury. Now, on one hand, if the Chiefs, similar to the Eagles, are able to see through this and they're getting that top 5 talent and the injury is not going to be a problem, the Chiefs get a steal here at 32. Now, what could be the problem here, and it was a very good tweet from Jesse Morse, who does injury work and talks to it, 45% of players who suffer the injury that Josh Simmons suffered never return to play after the injury. I don't think the Chiefs and the intelligence that they have in that building are missing so badly that Simmons is never going to see the field. However, the rate of return from an NFL player who gets injured, goes through rehab, and comes back to play following the injury has a significant drop in performance relative to what their baseline was prior to the injury. And so this is a very difficult injury to recover from. And the Chiefs are banking, again, with a first-round pick, that they can find the tackle, which they've been unsuccessful at doing. But now they're doing it banking on that the injury is going to be handled differently by Simmons compared to how other guys do. So there's a lot at risk for Kansas City with this pick. If they get it right, there's tremendous upside. If they get it wrong, which they have with tackles several times recently, then that's another big miss for them up front. John Coleman says Cowboys wanted Tet. If you think Parsons' live reaction wasn't staged, I agree with that. I think the Panthers taking Tet at 8 kind of threw things off for a few teams in this window, including the Dallas Cowboys. I saw there was, in addition to the Parsons one, I saw another live reaction from ESPN folks, and they were surprised that they went this direction. But that was what they were saying. They're like, if Tet would have been there, that was the Cowboys guy. Since he wasn't, that's what caused them to go offensive line. So I think you're right with that, John, and that's how it went. David says, I love the injury statistical information. I saw the tweet this morning with your percentages of return to play rate over the years, and it is absolute gold. I'm glad you're finding that useful. It certainly illustrates the risk that is there for sure. Another one that I like, Colston Loveland going to the Bears at 10. Very much a Laporta fit for the Ben Johnson offense. Another weapon for Williams. You have 3 new offensive linemen, a new tight end, a group of great receivers. There's no excuses for Williams now with Johnson calling plays and running that offense. So everything is there for Williams to succeed in the Bears, except for the schedule, which doesn't get any easier. A couple other ones that I would comment on before we get to some initial rookie odds that I saw posted. Gray Zabel going to the Seahawks, considering how Sam Darnold handles pressure. I think Seattle did the right thing getting Zabel. They could have went a couple different directions, but his versatility and how he's not very specific to a position is going to allow Seattle to fill in where needed. I just think it was the right choice for Seattle. So I think that was great. One other one that stood out to me that I think is good is Maxwell Hairston for the Buffalo Bills. I saw Ant say he would have preferred Trey Amos, but I think adding a corner with that amount of speed to the Bills' backfield and how they play is going to allow them to be very creative with how they use Hairston. I think he's going to be a great fit in the locker room. I think that's a nice add for the Bills at 30, going up and getting him perhaps over Amos, but that's a nice fit for Buffalo, getting Hairston with his speed, the ability to play off coverage, read and react. It's what McDermott wants. There's so many of these guys that are just, you see the direct connection between them and the coach and the scheme, and I think Hairston certainly fits that. Lightbringer says, I could be wrong, but I thought recently Micah said he wanted Golden. They always say different stuff, so you never know really. It's all planned. So you're going the other side of things saying it's planned. They visited with Golden. They loved them, apparently. Jane Slater was reporting how much of a fit it was, and then it just turned around as well. So I'm surprised they didn't go. I mean, Golden was there. I'm surprised they didn't go wide receiver over Booker with either guy, honestly. The ask of Golden to be a wide receiver number one for the Packers. Nothing that I was really reading about Golden in the draft process leading up said he is going to be the true wide receiver one for a team. And that's why I thought he made sense in Dallas, because he didn't have to be. He would just create space for CeeDee Lamb. With him going to the Packers, I don't know how that breakdown is utilized and where he fits in, because to me, the Packers have like 5 wide receiver ones, and none of them really stand out over the others. And that's kind of the issue they faced last year and the season prior. And I don't know if Golden solves that in Green Bay. I think people are just more excited that Green Bay finally drafted a wide receiver, more so than anything. Corey, thoughts on Cards taking Nolan? I love it. That was who I had going to them in the mock that I did 2 days ago. I think he fits exactly what Gannon wants out of players. Like, he's a great scheme guy for Gannon. I think the Cardinals now are in a position where that defense, with the additions to the defensive line in free agency and now in the draft, can be really contending to be top 10 for that defense. They just play so hard every single game, and Nolan fits that. I think the Cardinals are a sneaky team that's not completely underrated by the market, but I think there's a ceiling here for Arizona that's not quite realized yet in some of the pricing. So I think that was a good one. We have some props for rookies. Cam Ward with the Tennessee Titans is priced 3,250 yards, even money, if you want to go over that. The Titans are certainly going to be trailing in a lot of games the entire season, so there's going to be ample opportunity for him to be dropping back to throw. I don't have a lot of thoughts on these. I'm just going to read off some of the numbers and give some just like initial reaction and commentary. For a guy that's number one in that offense that's going to be trailing a ton, 3,250 initially to me seems a little bit light. I want to see, I don't have it off the top of my head what Titans QBs passed for last year, but that offense was as desperate as it gets. And it was a struggle. And so now if you get upside from Ward, it does feel a little bit light. Now, Caleb Williams last year, just out of comparison's sake, threw for 35-40. And you think he went through multiple play callers, multiple scheme shifts, had an offensive line that was problematic, held on to the ball forever. He got to 3,500. So perhaps we're looking at things a touch light there. Travis Hunter, receiving yards. This will be an interesting prop that gets thrown around a ton. 700 or more is minus 115. 800 or more is plus 150. I think this is quite interesting because how are they going to use him? If Hunter is a guy that is playing significantly more corner, I know we don't have unders for these. I don't know how you're not looking at the under. Now, if they move him to wide receiver, obviously you're wide receiver 2 behind Brian Thomas, and all of a sudden 700 is looking a little bit light. This feels very info-driven to me, which is unique for a non-injury scenario for a player prop for a season-long performance. If he's going to be more of a corner, to be a great corner and to also add on 701 or more receiving yards seems like a bit of a stretch. Colston Loveland, 700 or more, minus 135. That's, again, you're probably looking at Loveland. Does he take a leap over Cole Kmet? But he's certainly going to be sharing snaps with Kmet. Last year, Cole Kmet in that Bears offense went for 474 yards total as tight end number 1. So asking Loveland to come in and contribute 700 to 800 yards of offense as tight end 2, perhaps, unless this is a full shift where he gets favored over Kmet, that seems to me like a little bit of a big ask to begin. Ted McMillan with the Panthers, 800 is his over-under, minus 110 to the over. Fitting in, where does he land in terms of being wide receiver on the depth chart for the Carolina Panthers? If you're buying into the Panthers offense being what it was at the end of the year for the final 5 to 6 weeks, you're probably looking at Tet getting a ton of opportunities, and this number as a guy who can get downfield with the size 50-50 balls in that offense with Brad Idzik developing him and what you're getting from Dave Canales, you're probably looking at that as a little bit short for what could turn into him being a wide receiver number one. If you're thinking that the Panthers offense is going to be what they were at the beginning of the year, then you're probably looking at that as being a pretty lofty number. I would tend to lean towards the latter, given the track record of that coach and coordinator. And so I'll definitely be keeping my eye on that for Tet prices coming up. Rushing yards for Ashton Jeanty. His over-under at the moment, based on where the break is, 1,100 yards is what Jeanty is listed at. Now, we know that Pete Carroll loves to run the football. We know that Pete Carroll wants to run the football. My question is, are the Raiders going to be in enough positions in games where they are going to be able to run the football enough to get him into the 1,100 yard or more range? Because the Raiders, for as exciting as it is with Geno and Jeanty and what they did on defense, they're still team number 4 in the division. This is a team that's going to be playing from behind a lot. And while that does in turn allow opportunities for Jeanty to break off big plays, it's just, I wonder if the volume is going to be there consistently for him as a pure rusher to get over that number. I think this fully comes down to game state and what we see from the Raiders and how competitive they can be. I just don't know if we're going to see the Raiders front running a lot of games with a big lead where they're running the football 20, 25 times when he's stacking up yards. So that seems like a little bit rich to me to start off. And then we have sacks for Abdul Carter. 7+ is minus 150. With the way that defensive lineman is, or with the way that defensive line is, I think there's a very high ceiling for Carter on this. John Coleman says Loveland is high, I think. I'm with you. Odunze was 675 last year. I tweeted it. I think it's a monster year ahead for Rome Odunze. I'm not a fantasy guy. I don't play fantasy. Obviously, there's no props on him yet anyway. I think Odunze has a monster year for that Bears offense and probably becomes number 1 in production for wide receivers. So if Odunze was 675 last year and you're looking at Loveland even higher than that, and he's going to be sharing snaps with Kmet unless there's a big shift there, I'm with you that certainly does seem a little bit high. All right, that will do it for me today. I'm going to go reload on the Neocitrin and the tea to keep things steady. I appreciate everybody who's been following the Draft Talk for the last couple of weeks. Shows will continue next week. I'll be back Monday with a recap of the remainder of the rounds, what stood out to me, what I think was a win and a lose for teams, and then we will transition over with the schedule release May 14th, just a couple of weeks away. We'll get into some of the schedule predictions, strength of schedule analysis, some team looks, and then it is full-on team preview season just around the corner. So thanks, everybody, for stopping by. Enjoy the Friday. Enjoy the weekend. We'll chat to you on Monday morning.